Hey, I'm recording a podcast over here. Welcome to Your Inner Child is an Idiot, the podcast where we look back on things from our childhood and see if they were any good. My name is DJ.
Hello, DJ. I am Damon.
I like to put random high notes in the introduction now.
It's the introductions you don't play, they say, about podcasts.
That's jazz, baby.
I learned that from Ryan Gosling.
As everyone learned jazz from Ryan Gosling.
Sebs. You would never go by Seb.
Bastion.
Yeah, that's the gay
name.
version of Sebastian. You don't go by Seb because it just sounds like a guttural sound. Like you would constantly think that someone's saying your name when they're just sucking on a straw.
Apropos of not that, we're talking about my cousin Vinny today. MCV to the no one.
Oh yeah, the kids love the MCV.
You got your Joe Pesci's. You got your Marissa Tomei. You got your Ralph Macchio post Karate Kid. Mm-hmm. You got your character actor guy who plays the lawyer that opposes him.
Lane Smith, I believe, is the name you're looking for.
Lane Kiffin, college football coach.
Some of our favorites. You also have Austin Pendleton. You may remember him from the Muppet movie.
No, which guy is that?
He's the stuttering lawyer.
Oh, yeah.
Character actor Austin Pendleton. And let's not forget.
He's also in, wasn't he in Short Circuit? He was the bad guy, right?
Oh, not the racist caricature, but the actual bad guy. He might have been in Short Circuit.
The bad guy in the movie, not the bad guy in real life.
Sorry, Fisher Stevens. We know you've apologized many times.
We're not going to let it go, though, because it's still out there.
I feel like I can't bring it up without mentioning it. And let's not forget Herman Munster himself, Fred Gwynn.
Oh, okay. He's the judge.
Yes.
That's right. I knew there was something about the judge.
Something.
There's just something about the judge. Of course,
right here.
A star-making vehicle for Marissa Tomei.
Mm-hmm. Not to be confused with the differently named Mariska Hargitay.
Okay. Who's that?
She's on Law and Order Sex Stuff.
Sex Stuff.
That was the original, the working title of SVU.
LNOSS.
We gotta change this name, Dick. We can't we can't go with
Excuse me, Mr.
name.
Wolf? Is this what we're going with?
Do you prefer Dick or Mr. Wolf? Because they both seem aggressively sexual.
Mr. Dick, actually. Okay. Okay. So, my cousin Vinny, this one's going to be one of the tough ones for me because I have seen this movie at least once a year since it came out, probably. That's probably an exaggeration, but it's only slightly an exaggeration.
I probably haven't seen this movie for 20 years.
You haven't seen it at all?
No, I have seen it.
Original.
I have seen it, but I have not seen it in 20 years. It's been a long time. For some reason, I do like this movie. I remember liking this movie. And I believe I've looked up clips.
Yeah. Clips. Sorry. I don't mean to call you out, but that was a weird one.
It was a weird 49ers type voice. Clips.
So when you said 20 years ago...
It was almost Bill Cosby-esque, one might say.
Ooh, that's not.
Sorry, you got to get out of here with Fisher Stevens, Mr. Cosby. Not that you're the same, Fisher. He's just got to take the same train back out of the podcast with you. Don't sit on the same bench.
He's just going the same direction. It has nothing to do with anything.
We're not lumping you together, except we are to get you out of the podcast. We're trying to record.
Only logistically to
just
ship you away.
Just go with Bill Cosby. Just go with Bill Cosby.
Oof. So when you said 20 years ago, my brain went, no, you've seen it since it came out. It's
not even 20 years old.
As if to say, this movie came out 20 years ago. No, Damon. No. It's younger. It's older than 20 years old. We're closer to 30, right? Because what was it, 90?
Is it 92?
I want to say 92. Let's
right on the money, Damon.
Did you get it?
Good job. I'm doing that old-timey, cheering thing over your shoulder.
Yeah, hands over the shoulder. Yeah. Cousin Vinny, 1990. So this year is the 30th anniversary. Man, we're just gonna in March, no less. Look at that.
Mazel tov.
Let's pretend like we knew that and planned it as such.
Fisher Stevens said, actually, before he left, that we should do this for March.
Thanks, Fish.
For March 2022, and he didn't say why. He just sort of winked at me.
Yeah.
And I said, will you please go with Mr. Cosby out of this podcast?
Appreciate you, Fish.
Fish! Seb and Fish.
Mr. Dick, Fish, Bill. See you guys
I'm going to
later.
make sure I sprinkle all the terrible things I've referenced so that
Edit
Benny or you can't edit around it. It has to all be kept intact.
No one's editing their way out of this one. So
it's like a flan. You can't just divide it up. You're going to have to serve it whole.
I want you to know what this movie's about, because I know there's what Ralph Macchio plays. I'm going by memory here. His nephew.
Okay.
That was a joke. It's a joke.
So pedantic. Damn. I wanted to I think I've got him. I think I got him.
Okay.
He's fallen into my trap.
It's Ralph Macchio and his friends are accused of a crime that they allegedly didn't commit.
Let's
we don't
see
actually
how
know,
the trial
right?
plays out before I have a lot of faith in the justice system. Let's just see.
He has a lawyer in the family. He calls his cousin Vinny, which was the original title, and then they were like, "This is."
What if we made it more personal?
Yeah,
and to just have Ralph Macchio's character declaring the title.
And but is he a lawyer? Because no, he's not. Not really.
Well, he is, right? He's a lawyer.
Is he actually a lawyer at all, or is he just like a?
He is a lawyer. He just has never done a trial before.
Right. Okay. So
and he lies about his experience, his trial experience. Okay. But he is a lawyer.
But he's definitely not experienced. But he brings a little street smarts, and through the help of some members of the community and his girlfriend, played by Marissa Tomei.
Some members of the community. What is this, Sesame Street? What are you talking about?
There's a cast of characters who end up. He calls them in as witnesses.
It's not one of those one-man shows where Joe Pesci plays all the characters. There's a cast of characters.
I feel like I'm losing the thread, and I'm not even trying to recap right now.
I know. I'm taking delightful glee. Can you take delightful glee? Do you need to specify it's delightful?
I don't know if you can take delightful glee when you're the one who's derailing it.
I know.
You're like Mr. Mixelplix.
So when I get that. So why do you watch this every year? Do you own it?
It's not a thing. No, it's not a thing where I just pull it up on Doivadoy or on my archive
service.
Of streaming service. It's more one of those movies that if it's on, I will watch the entire thing.
Oh yeah,
front to back, and I think even one of those things where I might catch the tail end of it and go like, well, I'm just going to start this over because
the TNT model. They're like, don't worry, it comes on right after it's over.
Don't worry, we're just going to repeat this for the rest of the day.
We know you're hungover and you woke up halfway through My Cousin Vinny, so why not just watch the end and then watch the beginning again and piece it together in your head?
I'll tell you this. Once a year may be an exaggeration, but I've seen it enough that I do not remember seeing it for the first time, if that makes sense. I can't reflect on how I thought of it in 1992 because the more recent memories of watching it have replaced it.
That's an interesting way of thinking. I've never thought about that with movies, that I've watched it so much that I can't remember the first time. It's almost biblical.
That's how memories work. You rewrite it every time.
It's been with me as long as I can remember. There was no beginning. There was no first time with me and Cousin Vinny. I always was watching My Cousin Vinny.
Do you remember seeing it as a kid?
I remember this would have been a rental for the Xanthopoulos family.
Yeah.
And it also my dad had a weird habit of when someone was very funny in a scene, usually an attractive woman, maybe a Marissa Tomei type, if she said something sassy and it tickled him, but he already wanted to sort of go out to get something out of the kitchen and then come back and watch the rest of the movie, he would stand up first and then wait for her to say her sassy line, and then he would sort of hop run into the kitchen while going hoo-hoo, because it so tickled him, and sort of repeat.
But he knows
the
it's
line.
coming.
Well, no, he could sense, like, from the momentum of the scene, like, I just want to see her, put Joe Pesci in his place.
Yeah.
And then he would just sort of hoot to himself, so tickled that this
that
lady.
Is adorable.
It was very charming. At the time, I was like, where are you going? Why are you leaving the movie and hooting? But it is very
Got some good and plenty in the kitchen.
I do have a very distinct memory, though, not of me watching it, but when I was in college, I was a resident assistant. I was terrible at it, which meant that my residents loved me. Right.
You want an open flame in your dorm room? Go ahead. I don't see if I care.
Just don't catch anything else on fire. That's the important thing. If you can keep the fire contained, I don't have a problem with it. But there was a guy in our dorm named Juan who, I don't know how he discovered my cousin Vinny, but one day he found it. And then for at least...
Why are you saying it like it's the Ark of the Covenant?
Well, no. For the next, 3 weeks, every time I walked through the common area, he was in various stages of my cousin Vinny. And I was like, are you watching it, every day? And he's like, and laughing it as if it was just new to him. And let it wash over him. Every day. Planted in the couches. Not watching surrounded by schoolwork, but, watching my cousin Vinny.
Was he watching it in pieces or just every day he was watching it anew?
I think he would put it on. I think he was watching it anew. I think because our college station, we didn't get HBO until my senior year, but they had a college movie station where they had maybe 4 or 5 movies that they just played repeatedly throughout the month, and then the month would come and it would switch over. So you could probably find, if My Cousin Vinny was on that list, you probably could hit My Cousin Vinny
at some point
every day. And he was planted in the common room watching My Cousin Vinny to the point that it just became a joke that I'm like, oh, you're watching My Cousin Vinny again. Why wouldn't you be? You live here watching this movie. It was very charming. It was weird. And then it was this is annoying. And then it became almost ingrained into his personality. I'm like, Juan is watching My Cousin Vinny. Where else would he be?
That's what Juan does. He watches this movie from 1992. This is also the movie where I found out what grits were for the first time.
What is a grit?
It's one
of my favorite lines when it's said.
Yeah. And I didn't, I wasn't up on a lot of culinary things at this time, being 10, but I remember being huh.
Now that's interesting.
Knowing hey, 10 years later, I'll probably live in the South and we'll encounter grits slightly more often.
I think this movie would have also spoken to my family because we were also Northern transplants in the South. Mm-hmm. So at some point and we moved there in 1990, so just 2 years prior. So this would have come out when we were in Texas.
That's these grits we've been hearing all about.
When we arrived, Dad would have probably had a very similar conversation to what is a crit, and then he watched that be mirrored by Joe Pesci later on. Isn't that amazing?
You and I quote this movie a lot, specifically the moment where he says the 2 youths, and the judge, he's trying to say the 2 youths, and he says the 2 what? Is what the judge says. It's very good. And then he says it so it's obvious what he's trying to say. Oh, I'm sorry, the 2 youths. It's a very good.
I've also learned that this is a very accurate portrayal of a actual trial.
I've heard that.
And that it is used in law school often because it is a accurate portrayal of how a trial would proceed.
Should we bring in our resident lawyer for the second half of the show? Let's bring him in.
We could, yeah.
Oh,
bring it.
Let's do it.
Caleb. Get in here.
Get in here.
You can hop on the train when Fisher Stevens and Bill Cosby get off.
Wait, just wait. You might want to wait.
Pick a different car.
Okay, so we're going to watch My Cousin Vinny.
I'm looking forward to it. Can't wait.
Watch along with us. We'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my client, Damon Xanthopoulos, all he did was solicit your giving to his podcast. And I, for one, think not only is that not illegal, but in fact, it should be encouraged. In fact, I would say that any one of you could go to patreon.com/your inner child is an idiot and give as well, and you could scarcely be arrested for it.
The audience can't see this, but I'm playing the part of an old woman in the jury box, sagely nodding while I'm listening to you.
That's right. Grits do take a long time.
Right, yeah. Now that's interesting. Peanut butter, peanut butter, peanut butter, peanut butter.
Patreon.com/your inner child is an idiot. Damon Xanthopoulos.
Yeah.
Will you please recap My Cousin Vinny, the movie? I don't have
not the musical. There's a feeling I have in the back of my head that if it's not a musical, someone's working on it.
I feel like it's gotta be, right? Let's find out. My Cousin Vinny, the musical. Well, it autofilled for me. A new American musical adapted from the 1990 film.
Come on.
The Gambini Way. That's one of the songs.
Is To What one of the songs?
I'm just gonna listen.
To What?
I'm going to listen to this real quick.
Oh, no.
Can you hear that?
Sort of. It's a piano.
Before I even learned to say my A through C, I'm told that I knew how to spell BS. Yes, my nose fribble was notable. No loadable could get me. There's a Gambini way.
Yeah.
Did it open?
Seems like it was written in 2020, so no, probably.
Why?
Okay. All right.
My facade might be a little slight.
Mm-hmm. Because he's
I can't
sweet.
wait. What's that going to rhyme with? That's my curiosity now. I'm a chihuahua with a bitchin' bite.
Yeah. I feel like you know that's true.
You know the veracity of these claims.
Okay, well, that is more of a thing than I thought. Will you please recap this movie?
Two gentlemen from New York are driving cross country. They're going
New York City.
Get the room. Let's not just kill people because of states they're from.
Yeah.
Pace picante sauce. Didn't know you were pro murder, but I guess that's the marketing marketing choices you've made for your campaign ad.
Salsa.
Anyway, they're going to UCLA, so they wanted to drive cross country because of the scenery. They stop at the Sack of Suds, pick up some items, and Ralph Macchio sticks a can of tuna fish in his pocket because his hands are full. But wouldn't you know it, the teller there gets killed 20 minutes later, and the killers were driving a similar car. Ralph Macchio and his friend are arrested. Ralph Macchio finds out he has a lawyer in the family, the titular cousin Vinny. And, we find out that Vinny doesn't have much trial experience. That he only got his...
trial experience.
None. Put it as none. He only got his license 6 weeks ago. Took him 6 tries to pass the bar. So he's a little rough around the edges, courtroom style. Gets on the judge's bad side because he doesn't get dressed up properly. He doesn't seem to know any of the procedures.
Still in a recap. You can sort of breeze past that probably.
Wow. But yet I am charged with doing it. Anyway,
I'm here to let you...
Anyway, he wins the case. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, I'm here to let you know when you're in the weeds, just like you do me. So... just might want to pull that ripcord.
It's a long par 5 to the Act 3.
He wins. Okay.
He wins with the help of his girlfriend, who's been wanting to help him this entire time. And he shows that he has the stuff, even if he doesn't have the procedural knowledge. And that's what we all learned along the way.
He very clearly picked... I mean, what did he pick up in law school?
That's actually one of my questions for our expert.
Yeah, we do have a law expert coming.
To. I don't know why I don't know the answer already.
Well, we can put it later in the episode. We'll decide. But we have some law questions, and we have an expert coming in later. More importantly, you know what's really criminal?
What?
the little micro crustache that Ralph Macchio was rocking at the beginning of this movie.
It's in and out. It never stays around long. It's just like a ghost of a mustache. Is it there? Is it not? It's like an optical illusion. Is it an old woman? Is it a young woman? Is it Ralph Macchio's upper lip?
Depends on which way you look at it.
Yeah. So flip the paper upside down. It's a weird kind of shadow that only lives on his lip, not on his chin, just on the lip.
How old are these gentlemen?
They look in their 20s. Based on Stan Rothenstein's beautiful pale skin, I would say they're in their 20s. Ralph Macchio, though, is deceptively young, as we remember in Karate Kid. He was 21 when when filming Karate Kid. So I can only assume here he's like 56.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I know they're in undergraduate, right? Like we don't know like exactly what they're studying or what.
I thought they might be an overgraduate, as they call it. I've been overschooled. When they're still driving before they're arrested, the camera pans over their back seat and they have a college sweatshirt that says New York something or other, maybe NYU. So I wonder if they got their undergraduate and then they're going to UCLA to get their grad school degree. Overgraduate degree.
So the guy who directed Clue?
Jonathon Lynn.
Yeah.
Godsend. And he's British.
And there was something else too. Like he's Whole 9 Yards.
Well, yeah.
Is probably one we should cover because I remember liking that. And I was definitely an adult when it came out, but I'm not sure that one's going to hold up if I watch it again.
Well, don't forget, of course, the sequel,
Whole 10 Yards. Just not a phrase.
So there you go. Oh, he also directed The Distinguished Gentleman with Eddie Murphy. So there's that. He directed Nuns on the Run, which was another favorite of mine as a kid. Oh, yeah.
I don't know that one.
It's a British movie. It's Eric Idle and Robbie Coltrane as two men running from the mob. So they get dressed as nuns. Stop me if you've heard this before. Running from the mob, disguised as nuns. Mm-hmm. And then, they changed some hearts along the way.
We visited the Abbey in the top of the Manhattan Island. What's that called? The Cloister. And they kept saying, Run by Nuns. And we were like, that would be a cool band name. Run by Nuns.
It makes it seem like you might just be walking down the street and all of a sudden, someone like slaps you on the knuckles with a ruler.
Throws a rosary at the back of your head. Randy Edelman did the music for this. You may know him from The Chipmunk Adventure, doing music for that. Troop Beverly Hills, Twins, Ghostbusters 2, Quick Change, Kindergarten Cop, Drop Dead Fred, just a murderer's row of movies.
Sequels.
Beethoven, Last of the Mohicans, The Distinguished Gentleman.
See, Jonathon Lynn, he loyalty means something.
Angels in the Outfield, The Mask. We've seen him a lot. Billy Madison.
We've heard him a lot.
We've heard his work a lot. Gone Fishing.
Gone Fishing with Joe Pesci, another loyalty project. Dear friends. You know how the soundtrack guy is always on set to make sure he's like, I can probably score this.
I got this.
Keep going. Keep rolling because I can score this.
He's just got like a little Casio, so they're in the moment. They can hear what he's about to play.
D flat?
This feels like D flat. Okay, so let's move on. There's actually a lot. This sounds like we're stalling. There actually is a lot to cover in this movie.
It does seem like we didn't do the reading. We're just looking. Webster's defines my cousin as...
This is what I used to do when I literally had a teacher that would literally count the words to the 500 word essays we had to do. Mm-hmm. In the state of Alabama, in the southern region of the United States, on the continent of America, and the continent of North America, and on the planet Earth, in the solar system, in the Milky Way galaxy,
What I like about it though is that your writing is very musical.
Yeah,
it's like a waltz. No.
It's like jazz,
It's the words you're not saying.
Speaking of really getting to the meat of it, have you ever had boiled peanuts?
Ugh. Yes, my dad once went way down south. He brought boiled peanuts back. He's like, I brought boiled peanuts, and I looked in his hand and saw a moistened lunch bag. And I was like, are they in another place rather than that moist bag, that wet sack you have in front of me? And he said no, unfortunately. And I ate some. And I love peanuts a lot. I also love artichoke hearts, which is what they taste like. But I don't like hard, crunchy, semi-crunchy, I should say, artichoke hearts, which is what boiled peanuts taste like.
Somebody said they're like little potatoes, and I that sort of sounded interesting. But what I had the one time I've tried boiled potatoes, this is the most northern thing I've ever said, was like if peas were worse. They're like, you know how peas are kind of disgusting, unless you get like.
But go on.
I like a fresh, snappy. Pea or like a
green pea, but sometimes you get those cafeteria peas and they're
I'm thinking
olive green.
That's what I'm talking about. Those are the peas I grew up with. That when you say peas, that's what I'm thinking of. Something a British person would call a mushy pea. Which
you guys had an empire?
How?
What should we call this then? I don't know, mushy pea.
There's actually quite a bit of food talk in this movie. Let's get it out there. What are your feelings on grits?
I am staunchly pro grit. I do appreciate, one of my things that I like about this movie is I only lived in Long Island for 8 years, but I do remember the fish out of water feeling when I was 8 and moved to Texas, and I was like, what the fuck is wrong with all you people? So I do appreciate that, and I do also appreciate that I think there is some making fun, but he does like grits. Like, he does eventually come around on them.
Yeah.
Did you also catch him dip his corn in the beans at the barbecue place?
Yeah.
He took his corn on the cob and dipped it in the beans. Is that a thing?
I think he was just acting. Like that, because I noticed that this time where I was like, why would you do that? What is that?
Very odd. But
that just seemed like he needed something to do with his hands, and he was acting.
Right. Let me just do this. Yeah. Just grab the bread. Just use the bread and the beans. That makes somewhat sense. Anyway, I do like grits. I tend to put my egg yolks in them, which is not a popular thing to do. But I do like, because I take my eggs over easy. I move the yolk. I eat all the white. Take the yolk carefully. It's a very careful operation. Fork and knife underneath.
You fucking
move
psychopath.
it over to the grits. Slice the yolk open. The yolk runs into the grits. Mix it up. It's delicious.
Okay. All right. I'm not against that. I'm not against it.
No, I mean, people are against it until they try it. I remember when we would go to Sunday breakfast, which was at 1:30 in college, and I would always get grits with my meal. And I would do this, and my friend Doug, who's from Kentucky, was like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And then he came around. He's like,
"Where did you learn this?"
I remember as a kid, when we moved to the South, my dad went full tilt Southerner. It was like there was a regionalism vacuum.
You blend, Harry.
There was a regionalism vacuum, and he was like, I'm just going to take in all of this.
Got to assimilate.
And he got really into grits, and I remember being like, what are these? And I think I got them at Cracker Barrel as a side when we were moving to the South, and I had my eggs, and I was just like, well, what if I just move this yolk in there? And that's when I got into it. And he's like,
so you discovered that. No one showed that to you. That's great.
No one I've ever seen does that.
I never had them growing up, being more from the North, and came down here, and you hear about. I mean, I probably heard them. This movie probably introduced me to the concept of grits, so I knew what they were. But I never
feel like this was Grit's coming out party. This is when it was like, I'm going to make national news in My Cousin Vinny. This is it. My agent got me a bit part. It's a small scene, but I mentioned later on as well, it's kind of like Hannibal Lecter, where the grits are only in a small part of the movie, but they sort of hover over the entire thing.
This movie's about grits. I think we can all agree. Also learned that grits means girls raised in the South.
Ew, what? Is that true?
I mean,
who said that to you? A girl raised in the South, I assume.
A song called Grits taught me that.
Is it about fucking girls from the South?
Probably. I only know the chorus, which is "Girls raised in the South."
Wow, it's really operatic when you sing it.
Yeah. Girls raised in the South. There's a moment when I came down here, had grits for the first time, and I was kind of like, And then I had, shrimp and grits. Now I'm like, okay, now I'm on board. And then there was a barbecue place which has since gone away, or at least closed the place the store that I used to go to. They did buffalo grits. Now it does. I'm sure. Yeah, it was just flavored. They had like little tiny bits of buffalo chicken, and it had like a buffalo flavor. I really liked that. And it might be it's a bastardization. I'll admit it, but I liked the sort of like making it more flavorful. I liked it.
They're just a starch. They're hard to really be completely put off by.
Yeah, it's good, and it is. I like it better when it's like a bed for something, So I think the egg thing, I could get behind it. I'm saying, I agree with you.
Thank you. I like that barbecue scene as well, although it's not as central to the thing. The best part of that grit scene, though, is when they pull the menu out and they look at it for a while and they're just sort of hemming and hawing.
Breakfast?
And breakfast, you think? And then you see the menu. It's just breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Those are your options. And you get, I guess, whatever the fuck he makes for you.
Yeah. I kind of like that. I kind of wish there were... there are, I guess, still restaurants like that, but I would like that. I don't even need to know if you think this, because I just believe this to be true, which is that the sort of there's been a lot of regionalisms that we've lost over the ensuing decades after this movie. It's not all gone, but there's still there's a lot more difference between rural and urban than there is between South and North. Like, there's still some differences, but I think because of the internet, because of the prevalence of movies and TV, there's just not as much difference, like in terms of like food and types of food. Like,
I think you just see the growth of giant corporations. So you just tend to see the same fucking gas stations and restaurants everywhere. No, I think you're right. There was part of me that's like, are they over-southing the South here, or is this actually maybe what rural South really looked like in 1992.
Well, they don't.
I have been to parts of the South though where I'm like, we can't stop here. We need to keep going. We're too gay to be here.
Yeah, and it is also like a very small town vibe too, which is a different thing than like coming to Nashville or Memphis or whatever, where it's like it's different, but it's also like this is still a big city. You can go to a grocery store if you want, where there's like small towns still where you're like, there is nowhere to stop. Like, I gotta go.
We gotta stop in the sack of suds.
You gotta stop in this sack of suds and put a can of tuna in your pocket.
Oh, and I also want to say to Marissa Tomei, as a northern transplant to the South, yes, the Chinese food is terrible.
How did you feel about there's a pretty lengthy prison rape joke bit, which I had forgotten about.
Yeah, it's not the high point of the movie.
Yeah, it's played like an Abbott and Costello bit, because there's two things that happen where, so as you mentioned in the recap, Ralph Macchio sticks a can of tuna in his pocket. He forgets about it, so when he gets pulled over, he had realized that he had that can in there, so he's like, okay, sorry, officer, but this is no big deal. That the first 10 minutes of them being arrested, he's like, I did it, I'm sorry, you don't need I'll waive my rights. But of course the cop is incredulous. It's a very it's not that funny, but it's like kind of a silly misunderstanding. And then when they get into the cell, he's Macchio's called his cousin Vinny, and the other guy, what's the
Stan Rothenstein,
doesn't realize he's worried about getting
raped in prison. Yeah.
Gay prison raped.
Being a guy named Bubba's
sexually assaulted. Yeah. And so when Vinny shows up and he's like, all right, let's do this.
Right, because Vinny arrives and Ralph Macchio is asleep. And so Stan doesn't know who Vinny is. And Vinny doesn't explain who he is. He's just like, I asked where the new guys were and they took me here. And there was part of me, of course, like a prison rape joke is exhausting at this point in my life. Yeah. But there was an appreciation.
This was still fresh then.
There was an appreciation for new. How long it goes on without anyone realizing what the other person is talking about. Because it does work pretty well in that they are both talking about two different things. Vinny, of course, is talking about the trial, and Stan thinks he's about to be raped by, the head prisoner, I guess, or whatever you'd call him. And he's like, I didn't come here to get jerked around, says Vinny, because Stan's being so weird. That one made me laugh out loud, even though I'm ashamed of it. But yeah, it's hard to, in this post I now pronounce you Chuck and Larry World. It's hard to really enjoy a gay panic joke.
He does call, when Machio wakes up, he does call him Vinny Bag of Donuts, which...
a fun nickname, but I'm like, wait, what happened with the bag of donuts? Why are you calling it that?
I guess that's just a thing. I only knew it from, there's a Mike Birbiglia bit where he talks about Joey Bag of Donuts. So I thought that was like a bit, but apparently this is predates.
Mike, you've got something to answer for.
Marissa Tomei, just lighten up the screen.
It is true. She is fantastic. My brother has a lifelong grudge against her for winning the Oscar.
Jason, let me be the first to say this. Get over it.
She was up against Joan Plowright and Miranda Richardson and
you can't just make
Judy
up actress
Davis
names.
And other. I can't remember. Oh, Vanessa Redgrave, also known as other Redgrave.
Evelyn Metastati.
She's good. She's great. But she divides the Academy, and she's just
Gloria Glorison.
Well, she would go on to win 3 years later. That was her breakout role that you're referring to, that she was nominated for in 1993. But in 1995, she wins for All Quiet on the Eastern Front, the long delayed sequel.
Paula Priscillaton of the Cambridge Priscillatons. Yeah, she's good. I thought she was phoning it in that role. So that's just me. In Mute My Love. I'm gonna say something that's probably gonna just throw you for a loop.
Please.
Revolutionary. Marissa Tomei is she's a good-looking lady.
Yeah, she is symmetrical. All her facial parts are where you'd expect them to be. That's what I like about her. But not only the only things I like about her. I like her symmetry, sure, but she's very smart, and she's got some garish outfits, which I always appreciate. She has very teased hair, another appreciative thing.
She's got the streaks of gray.
Yep, she does have that one skunk spot in the back.
Yeah.
But I want to say, Marissa Tomei, suffered a lot for winning her Oscar so young. Her career, kind of took a nosedive for 10 years until it sort of bounced back afterwards. And now, she's in Spider-Man.
So, wait, I guess I'm not familiar with what happened after she won the Oscar for this movie. Because
people didn't think she deserved it, because this was, her really breakout role.
This is just a comedy thing, because,
people get angry about things.
Yeah, and she is, it was best
I think
actress.
Also, it looks like when we looked up who she was up against, what it looks like to me is that all these, big stage actresses and big names probably all split the fucking vote, and Marissa Tomei got it.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not familiar with any of the other performances. I think this performance is Oscar worthy.
Oh, I think she does a great job. She's fantastic in this.
This is
not to mention it's the movie that survived. All the other movies I named that Joan Plowright and Miranda Richardson is, I'm I've never heard of any of these. And Judy Davis was nominated for Husbands and Wives. Woody Allen.
Yeah. To say that she carries this movie sounds like nobody else is doing anything, and that's not true of this movie, but she is a really bright spot in this movie. She's very funny in an already funny cast. In a funny fish out of water story, she is even more of a fish out of water than
she's the fishiest out of the water.
And yet she also I don't know, it's for a she doesn't play the damsel in distress, you know what I mean? She's very smart. She's very you can see why she and Vinny love each other. They have a very, you got
mixed attractiveness relationship. Is that what you're looking for?
No.
May-December relationship?
You're saying,
but they have a good repartee.
I'm saying they have a very they're always at each other's throats. They're always bickering. They're always,
in a playful way.
But it's it's pretty loving. They do, and eventually, they have a conflict, and it's kind of runs the third act. But you can see, I don't know, sometimes, especially in something like this where you've got Joe Pesci who looks like Joe Pesci, and then you've got Marissa Tomei 30 years younger who looks like Marissa Tomei.
Right.
I actually kind of buy it in this. Maybe that's wish fulfillment, who looks way more like Joe Pesci than somebody who should be with Marissa Tomei. But I kind of buy it because
you're somebody's cousin, so I gotta say, at the very least, someone can say my cousin. your name.
DG.
What was that name again? No, I think my biggest fear, like going back to this, was that I would be really bothered by their relationship. And there is a little bit of like, hey, lady, what are you doing with this frogman? And I think in a lesser writer's hands and in a lesser actor's hands, she would like have that sort of like King of Queens vibe where it's like, what are you doing? What is this?
Yeah.
And I think that she could have possibly, like in a lesser movie, like fallen into the nagging girlfriend role. And I don't think the movie is very much on her side, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
She is like sort of ragging on him, but it's completely understandable. I think one of the cleverer things that this movie does very quietly is that it shows how fucking bored she is.
Yeah.
Like every time we see her, the first time we see them in the first hotel, she's playing solitaire. Then the next time we see that she has all these People magazines that are lying around the hotel room because she has nothing else to fucking do. And then eventually she starts reading his law books because she's bored out of her mind because there's nothing to do in these small towns, and he refuses to let her help him.
Yeah.
So she just starts finding stuff to do. She has her little camera everywhere taking photos. It's very charming. Camera. And there's a very cute scene like where they're, I think it's to exemplify his argumentative nature that sort of drove him into getting his law degree. So there's a cute scene where they're arguing about, a leaky faucet, and he's asking her if she had turned off the faucet or not. And they sort of play off each other. And it's very cute, and it's funny, and it's also a little sexy. It's a very charming scene.
It also sets up the end of the movie.
Right, exactly. How their rhythm when they argue with each other. It's very cute. I buy into it a little bit. They have some chemistry, even though they do seem particularly mismatched. I do get the vibe, though, from the movie. I've never had this. The only time I've had this before was when I watched As Good as It Gets with Jack Nicholson, where if you just sort of pay attention to the writing of this movie, I'm like, do you mean to hire a 30-year-old man to play Joe Pesci's part? And Joe Pesci said yes, and you're like, let's just go with Joe Pesci. He's already won an Oscar. Let's do this. Because the vibe of it's never addressed that he's an older man, and this might just be Hollywood. It's never addressed that he's an older man, and I just get the vibe that he's supposed to be playing a very young man, but he is. But they got Joe Pesci instead. Oscar winner Joe Pesci. Yeah,
if they hadn't, if it weren't kind of clear that he's 27 years older than her, I would have thought they were like high school sweethearts. They were at least a couple years apart at most.
Yeah,
just he was the vibe.
She was a freshman, and he was a senior, a 17-year senior.
She was a freshman. He was a senior citizen.
Can I also bring up something else in relation to Joe Pesci's age?
Please.
Something I noticed this time, and then once I saw it, I could not see it. I think Joe Pesci got a facelift before this movie. His wrinkles, his eye, like the lines around his eyes, all go sort of up. And whenever he's sort of looking down, you see like the skin is not hanging in a natural way. It's sort of, and I'm wondering I'm assuming what he has on is a wig.
Right.
Because he is bald, even by, fucking Home Alone, which was the year before. He is bald in that movie. I want you to, next time you watch My Cousin Vinny, just keep an eye out for the lines around his eyes and how his neck moves.
Once again, face shaming.
I won't stand for it. I'm just a man watching a movie.
There's a really great scene right before the arguing foreplay thing where they're in a bar. So she's trying to I think partly because as you mentioned, she's bored, and also they need money because they don't have any money, which also would make more sense if he was younger, because it's like, even if I don't know what else he was doing for a living, but even if he was a mechanic or whatever, like, it
seems like he was a mechanic.
Yeah,
with her,
you would have some money to go on a trip for a few weeks, right? But
especially the way my mechanic charges me.
Yeah, am I right? Gobberator. More like a see you later. No? Okay.
That's all right.
Okay. I read that on a now and later. So there's a scene in the bar. So she tried to hustle somebody, and they
for bail money,
her.
yeah.
for bail money. And because he keeps getting thrown in. That's why, you're right, because he keeps getting thrown in jail for contempt. Question for our law professor later. But there's it's the guy that is the first manager of the band in That Thing You Do. I can't remember the actor's name, but he's the bar lunkhead. Yeah. And there's a great scene because he's very clearly dumb. And you also see, it's a good example of Vinny's arguing skills and also his kind of toughness, because he's like, how about you give me the money or I'll kick your ass? But it's very good because the guy's like, well, no, I don't like that.
Yeah, he argues with him, which is the actor's name is Chris Ellis, and he's playing JT in this. It is a really good scene, I think, because at that point you haven't seen Vinny in any sort of why does he want to be a lawyer? Why is this his thing? And it's a good moment where he actually is kind of good at breaking down an argument. He's just literally not good at the procedural stuff of law.
When I think we can learn anything,
I feel like wearing a suit seems obvious, Yeah,
I don't know where that comes in the training. I mean, it seems like the first thing, if you picture a lawyer,
do that.
I think we all know that the main thing about practicing law in real life is it's mostly about just generally liking arguing. And it's not about being very meticulous about specific details and paperwork.
Right. I did like I love a running gag. And so I do like I always forget that this joke, this JT, like with the $200 is in there, but it is nice. Like, it's always like a nice little rest stop throughout the movie that, here's JT again about the money. I really like it. And then it ends with, he finally gets the $200 and Joe Pesci just knocks him out in one punch.
He does a Super Mario jump
into his face, knocks him out in one punch and takes the money.
It very much reminds me of the pre-mushroom Super Mario jumping and punching. Boing. It's very good.
That also has a very good scene because we learn from the defendants talking to Joe Pesci about his trial experience that he had never been in a trial, and he had previously sort of done probably pleas. I'm assuming he pled things down before a trial, and that it was mostly personal injury stuff. And while he's at the bar, he sees a guy in a neck brace, and he's like, "You get rear-ended?" He's like, "No, I fail." I was like, oh. And then he keeps talking to JT, and then right before he leaves the bar, he's like, "Did you fall at your place or somebody else?" And he's like, "My place." And he's like, "Shit." And then just walks away. Made me laugh. I also like that scene because it has a record scratch. It's one of those tropes that was exhausting at first, and now I feel like it's like Sideshow Bob and the Rakes, where after a while it just is great again. Just bring me a record scratch every time.
Oh yeah, so when they're at one of the hotels, I can't remember. I think it was the train, the first one where like, or no, the second hotel. There's a train that comes early in the morning, and he goes downstairs to talk to the clerk, and just the way he rings the bell, just ding, ding, just keeps ding, 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 was very funny.
And that also has another sort of Abbott and Costello joke where he asks him, he's like, Is it common normal? For that train? Yeah. Is it normal for that train to come by at 5 a.m? He's like, "No, sir, it's very unusual." And then the next day, of course, it comes by again. And he goes, "You told me that wasn't normal." He's like, "Yeah, usually it comes 10 after 4. Which is a very stupid joke.
It's very vaudeville. Yeah, but it's good. The way that the next place they stay is the other attorney, the prosecutor's barn, hunting barn. Lane Smith, and they're woken by a screech owl. Pretty adorable screech owl.
Oh, very! It looks like just like a pug with feathers, and it's up on that tree. It's so small, it makes the most god awful sound I've ever heard in my life. But it is very cute, and is not bothered by the fact that Joe Pesci just fired a gun blindly into the woods, wearing naught but a leather jacket, Air Jordans, and his briefs. That's it. Just firing a gun into the woods. He just fires
as he comes out. Just pow, pow, pow. I really love that bit. Both the way that he fires Both like the way that he fires and the way he comes out, the way he's dressed, and then when he goes back in, he's like kind of proud of himself. Mm-hmm. And then the screech owl immediately makes the sound, like the screech owl's reaction, which is very good comic timing.
Oh yeah, he just looks over his shoulder, and then screeches again.
And then it screeches again, and instead of doing anything, he just slowly closes the door. It's a good bit.
And it's all one shot, which I also appreciate.
I mean, you love a tracking shot. I always say that about you.
You know, I also noticed, speaking of shots, there are a lot of Dutch angles in this movie. You catch that? Mm-mm. A lot of shots where it's just slightly askew to make you uncomfortable.
When's
it's an odd choice. Well, when Mr. Gambini has fallen asleep in trial, Fred Gwynn's character, the Judge Haller, he leans over the bench and the camera is like, again, slightly askew. And he goes, Mr. Gambini. We also get it, I think, when they first arrive in prison, which makes a little bit more sense that it's slightly askew. As of course, Stan is worried about getting ass raped by a gentleman named Bubba, a hypothetical man named Bubba. We also get another one when the sheriff is interviewing Ralph Macchio about, and did you tell your friend? Oh, he wasn't part of this. And he starts writing it down. Aiding and abetting. That's all in a weird Dutch angle where just looking at the guy. I feel like it tends to use it with authority figures in this movie, but it popped up so frequently that it felt like I was watching Kenneth Branagh's Thor movie.
I didn't know it. I didn't know. Sorry, I can't speak. I don't know why. I don't know why I said it that way. I didn't notice, and therefore, it must have been effective because it just.
Were you uncomfortable at any point during the course of the movie?
Damon, I was born uncomfortable.
Weren't we all? It's so cold here.
There's also a moment when in the hunting lodge, they decide they've had enough of this owl, so they take the car out in the yard and they park, and of course it rains like crazy and they get stuck in the mud, and then
the Alabama mud.
He gets mud all over his suit because he pulls it out, and then when they get back to town, she says, "You take a fucking shower, I'll get your fucking suit." That's good.
I had forgotten that the F-bomb is used so liberally here. For some reason, I got in my head that this is a PG-13 Pesci joint, but those are few and far between for Joe Pesci. I do like a good F-bomb peppered.
This is a hard R.
Oh, hard R.
You saw that screech owl. It knows what it was doing.
Well, let's talk about Lane Smith, because I feel like we could go on about Fred Gwynn forever, and that's what we should do. Lane Smith died in 2010. Character actor, we remember him, you and I, from Son-in-Law. But you'll also remember him from Jonathan Lynn's other movie, The Distinguished Gentleman with Eddie Murphy.
Clue. Oh. he played Christopher Lloyd in
He played
Clue.
the billiard room. A lot of people didn't realize. He's very recognizable.
Lane
He
Smith
always
as.
usually plays these sort of conservative-ish, but like good old boys. I think he's actually Southern.
Yeah.
What I like about him in this role, both him and the sheriff, I feel like, again, in a lesser movie would be like villains or corrupt or something. They're both like doing their jobs competently.
Yeah.
And they're nice enough gentlemen. They just aren't on Cousin Vinny's side of this trial. So they're portrayed, or at least Lane Smith is portrayed as the opposition, but not an enemy, not a villain in this movie, which I found really charming. And I think if we haven't already with Caleb, we will talk with Caleb about. I think that's somewhat realistic. Like, they understand that their roles are just, to either defend the state or to defend the accused. That's our job.
Yeah. Well, and even the sheriff is more adversarial in the beginning when he's arresting the guys.
When he thinks they're murderers, which is understandable.
All evidence pointing to them being murderers in this tiny town, which they probably don't see a lot of murders. And then, but of course, as the trial goes on, he sort of disappears for the most, which is understandable. It's fine.
I've watched Law and Order. I know that they're only in the first half of the story. They're not in the order half. They're always in the law half.
I actually want to ask that too. Is it normal for like a sheriff to be in the courtroom sitting at the prosecutor?
He's sitting not just in the courtroom, but like sitting at the same table with the DA, which I did find odd. I mean, that also speaks to, the chumminess of, prosecutors and cops, which can sometimes be problematic in our criminal
order and
justice,
law, as we call it.
As we all say. You probably play that on your lute there, your little lyre that you keep. But yeah, I just wanted to say that I like that Lane, that this is a smart enough movie to treat us with some intelligence about the DA.
Although we get when Vinny kind of boots the first part of it, like blows the first part of the trial, Stan gets his own lawyer. He gets the public defender. And that guy is
Austin Pendleton.
We decide to make fun of his stutter a little bit too much for my comfort. I remember thinking that was funnier than I do now. Back in the day.
Right. I think he's supposed to be portrayed not necessarily, because when he talks to Stan, he doesn't have a stutter. It's when he gets up on the jury. He starts sweating profusely, which I noticed this time on my HD TV, and stuttering, which... Yeah, you probably shouldn't make fun of people who stutter, but he does seem to be having trouble getting the words out. And at one point, he grabs a juror's shoulder because he can't say convenience store. He's getting stuck on the C of convenience store. And the juror's just like so uncomfortable with this man grabbing his shoulder, like full on leaning on this man's shoulder. He starts to look like that one puppet of Jeff Dunham, that one grumpy old man puppet, which I appreciate. He sort of folds his face in because he's so uncomfortable. Made me laugh. Shouldn't laugh at people with speech impediments, but you should laugh at people who are nervous. It puts them at ease because they're like, you know what? I'm making people laugh. Maybe I'm doing this defending a man who's been wrongfully accused of murder thing correctly.
He also
I'm getting better, says Austin Pendleton.
Well, because I wish that I could laugh at it more because I do think it's kind of messed up. Now that I think about it, because people do struggle with stuttering, and it's not funny. But the comic parts of it beyond the stuttering are very funny. He gives a little wave after, towards as he walks back to the defense. And I
feel like it's one and the same with the. Again, another thing that you shouldn't make fun of, but in Princess Bride, when you have this very stately bishop at the wedding, he turns around, he looks very regal, he's all frocked up, and of course then he, has marriage, and he has this very nasally speech impediment. So it has that same vibe of let me present myself as completely competent and then show myself to be unconvincing as a trial attorney, perhaps.
The guy also has because he is incompetent. He doesn't just show, he isn't just nervous.
Right.
He's
it's
also
not just because he's a stutterer. He is not necessarily, because his opening argument is one sentence long.
Yeah.
And Stan is like, is that it? That's all you're going to say? And he's like, what about all those things we talked about?
I get nervous.
I get nervous. I'm getting better.
And then he also, when the guy talks about his glasses and he's like, no. And then he goes, no more questions. Really accusatorily.
When he reveals that they were reading glasses so he wouldn't have to wear them to identify the defendants. No more questions. Your prescription glasses. And he's so pleased with himself. He's like, I got him on these reading glasses thing. Also, I feel like, not to bounce around back to Lane Smith, Lane Smith is very showboaty, which I appreciated. We see him both in conversation with Joe Pesci in his offices, and he's just very conversational, good old boy. And then we see him on the trial, and he's very into using his hands.
Yeah.
What I think don't matter. It's about you, what you think.
I'm just a simple caveman.
And then he, hello, Caleb. Oh no, he's frozen. How are you?
Hello.
We were talking about Lane Smith's opening statements.
Everything about him is wonderful.
But he does. My favorite part that I always think of whenever I see the word identical is identical. The hands, because he's just a small town Alabama County DA, but I feel like he does a good job of relating to the jury and really making extreme eye contact and deranged motions that will help them remember things. Also, there was a cinematography joke that I appreciated.
Cinematographical.
as cinema. He goes, now that word comes from England and all our little ancestors. And the camera deliberately cuts, I would say, to a black woman in the jury, and I giggle a little bit.
She's just kind of like
we don't all have the same ancestors, Lane.
should we cut to our friend, our guest?
Yeah. Okay. Puppies in the background.
That's Mara. She's huge.
She is big. She looks smaller in your Instagram for some reason, and this time just looks like an Irish wolfhound just stalking the background.
She just weighed in at 106 at her last.
Oh, wow.
That is a big dog.
She's the smallest of her litter. All her brothers are like 115, 125.
What is she?
Mostly Great Pyrenees with a whole bunch of everything else
Just get that all in here.
Yeah. Some of her littermates, the owners did like the DNA testing, and it was like 15 different breeds.
Right. But yeah, DJ, if we want to do let's do the expert part, and we can come back and talk about Fred Gwynn.
I like this movie so much.
Don't worry, I'm getting the vibe that we both also like this movie so much.
Yeah.
I don't want to spoil it.
I don't want to say.
I thought a lot of it was going to be real stupid, and it kind of wasn't.
Have you never seen this
before? Is this your
before?
first time watching it?
Yeah, I've never seen it. I've definitely seen clips of it. I've seen I've seen like the finale clip where Marissa Tomei does the whole expert thing, but I've never seen the whole movie.
It's an enjoyable watch.
This movie is dealing with the law, which neither of us are experts in. I can't even speak. That's how little of an expert you know about I am. The law. So we thought we'd bring in an expert. Mr. Caleb Money, how are you?
I'm great. I'm so happy to be back on the show.
Thank you for being here. We got you out of stasis after watching The Santa Claus, and now you're back to talk about My Cousin Vinny, the two greatest legal movies of all time.
It's great to be unfrozen and.
We thought this one would actually be good because, as I understand it, this is actually somewhat accurate, as opposed to, not that we were asking about accuracy in the Santa Claus, but it was more just
that's accurate too. Mythical beings that live in the North Pole and the contracts that they signed by murdering their predecessors. That's pretty accurate too.
Pretty standard. Yeah.
But we also just learned that you hadn't seen this before. You've never seen this movie.
I hadn't. No, I watched it this morning for the first time.
Did you have any experience with it, like from law school? Like, did anybody show this in law school? There's like people say they show this in some law school classes.
No, not me personally, but I was talking with my partner about it this morning, my law partner, and he was like, oh yeah, one of his trial classes, they talked about it all the time. And I was checking with another friend of mine who's a really an accomplished criminal defense attorney in town, which I am not. And he was saying like, oh yeah, a bunch of people will say like, if you watch any like halfway decent law scene in a movie, you're probably 75% ready to go. Like
really?
In a real courtroom. I was like, okay, great.
That was Vinny's problem. He didn't watch enough trial movies.
Exactly. Just get on it, man.
That's most of our like. Do you have any broad statements that you want to get to before we just ask you questions?
Yeah, I mean, I did find it to be pretty accurate. I did a little bit of criminal representation really right when I got out of law school, and it seemed pretty accurate. Like especially like you don't always see like an arraignment and then a preliminary hearing.
Yeah, they skip.
And they actually preliminary hearings are they're kind of this like constitutional protection. They're not in the Constitution, but it's like a development from that. But they're all like that. They're all like all you have to do is basically the prosecution has to prove that there's enough evidence to go to trial, and it's pretty likely that they got the right person. It's a really low bar, and so they're almost like a joke. Like nobody ever wins a preliminary hearing on the defense. I actually saw one happen one time, and it was very impressive. But yeah, for the most part. And then it was just funny too that the arraignment, like that's literally it. It's a 10-minute thing, like guilty, not guilty. Make sure your name is spelled right, and you have an attorney. And him trying to like go into the argument was really funny.
Yeah.
And I really identify with his like instinct to start just explaining how it's all a misunderstanding.
Right.
Like there's so many times that I would love to in my like legal situation be like, look, we all just got off to the wrong foot. Let's just, figure this out, and it's like, nah, you can't do that.
Right.
By the time
These
you're in court.
procedural steps you have to go through before we can get to beginning to unpack that. So I guess just going off of the preliminary hearing, what is the difference between that and you always hear about grand jury things, which also seem to be the purpose is to find out if you have enough evidence to go to trial. Is there a difference, or is it just a different terminology for the same thing?
There is a difference. I'm a little fuzzy on what it is, just because I've never done a lot of criminal, but in Tennessee, where we are and where I am licensed, it's a whole very many steps, and I don't know how much you want to go into that, but a lot of like lower level crime starts at the lower level court, which in Tennessee is called General Sessions, and then that literally the day you show up, well, usually the second day, almost everybody comes for the first time, and they're just like, get an attorney, come back. The first like day of something happening, if you're not just going to make a deal right away with the DA, you do a preliminary hearing, and there's strategic things about like, oh, do you want to get the police officer on record? Do you want to not do that? Like, for the most part, I think most good attorneys pretty much always do a preliminary. The grand jury is another way to. I think I'm getting it right. Good expert. That you can charge people two different ways. You can either charge them by like bringing a police officer in who writes a report and says, I saw this happen, or I got called to the scene. Or you can like assemble a grand jury and present them with evidence, and they come up with the charging document. Okay. In Tennessee, as in a lot of states, the grand jury is a real sketchy institution. Like, it's the defense and the defendant and his attorney and or her attorney, they don't show up. It's all one-sided. And there are these, like, in quotation marks, like professional grand jurors. There's like a handful of people who are there all the time. It's not like they do a jury selection. And these people kind of just like have a reputation for rubber stamping anything the state wants to bring to prosecution.
It's like general casting. Just go get Greg and 11 other guys and bring them in here.
But or what he says,
23 other guys.
What Vinny said to the Karate Kid is correct. He was like, you didn't even ask any questions. And he said, like, listen, like, this is murder charge in a small town, Alabama, like, you're gonna go to trial, is essentially correct. Like, if it's something the state cares about, they're probably gonna go.
Okay.
I really identified a lot with this movie. I was like, oh, there's a lot. And the two scenes were, one was when he was in the hotel room with Marissa Tomei and he was really stressed out and he's like, I think I'm screwing this case up. I'm like, yeah, I've been there for sure. And I have a trial in immigration court coming up in May. And I'm like, I have lots of time to prepare. I've got a lot of help. I'll be fine. But it's still, I wake up in the night thinking like, oh my God, like, this is coming up and this person's like life it's not like a murder trial where could be an execution or even in jail, but like this person's significant life is on the line. And I wake up in a cold sweat sometimes. And I identified with that and him getting stressed out as his girlfriend, just being like, you're not helping me, like, go away. It's like, yeah. But then the other thing is like small town court procedure. It's not even procedure. It's just like kind of rules. Like when he wore the wrong clothes and the judge was like, I'm going to put you in contempt.
Yeah.
I had a pretty similar experience because I was in a county south of here, which is much more rural than Nashville and much more like good old boys kind of atmosphere. And I was doing a criminal defense case, and it's really frustrating because there's not like signs and stuff for the attorneys that say like walk here and sit here. Right. If you don't know what you're doing, you have to kind of like look around and see like, oh, everybody seems to be like sitting on this bench that has a briefcase, so I'll go sit on that bench. And I was in court, and I was standing up at the podium. And all the courtrooms I've been in Tennessee, you don't just stand up at the desk. Like there's a little podium with a microphone for the attorneys. And I was standing there waiting. There's a lot of waiting, especially in that particular court, where like you kind of meet up and they do like a roll call, and then you go in this back room and wait your turn to talk to the DAs to try and figure out what's going on or make a deal or whatever. And so I was just waiting around, and the judge started talking to me about my beard because I have a really long beard. And so I was standing up at the podium, and he was like, oh, it looks whatever. And I'm like, it's always terrible when that kind of person wants to talk about my beard.
Like he was kind of joking around, or was he like, you don't look very laurely? He
was being pretty cordial about it, but just kind of trying to make conversation. And I hadn't been in the courtroom before. And then I heard the clerk talking about my client, and it sounded like they were trying to get me a second court date, but I really was supposed to be resolving it that day, and I rushed over there, and I walked between the desk where the attorneys sit and the judge's bench and hit the court officer, which is not like a uniformed police officer. It's just a guy in a suit that has a badge who he's the one that says, oh yeah. And he's the one that hands papers back and forth and whatever. He was this guy who looked like he was retired, just came rushing at me like, you don't walk here. Like, what do you think you're doing? And I was like, what? And then I was like, I'm really sorry. And then I headed back to where I was, and he yelled at me again. And it turns out the judge, it's kind of an unwritten rule. Like, you don't walk between the bench and the desk. Like, that's the judge's area. But there's not a sign there or anything.
Right.
And I got like a real dressing down in front of a lot of people. Wow. Like, from this older guy. And it's kind of like, that's the deal. Like, the judge lets the court officer handle stuff like that, so he never has to get angry or look out of sorts. Like, he just lets his bulldog handle that stuff. And I was so furious and confused when I went home that day, and I was like, I'm never coming back to this county again. This place can rot. Like, so I identified with him, just like, it's like when you're watching the movie, you're like, obviously, dude, wear a suit. But like, man, when you're in that situation, if no one's ever told you, don't wear a leather jacket, you don't know what to do.
Yeah. They don't cover that in law school.
No, usually not.
Yeah, that was one of the things that comes up. He mentioned, like, Marissa Tomei is sort of ragging on him when she gets him out of jail the first time, and says, they don't cover this in law school, and he says, no, it's just about like the actual law, not these like procedural things.
Oh, it's procedural
is that
stuff.
Accurate?
It's such a headache. Like, and there's the stuff that people like lawyers refer to as procedure, which is like, oh, you file this form. Like, procedure is things like there's a preliminary hearing and here's the kind of questions you can ask. And I remember I went to a 6-hour-long training at the local court here on like how to take appointed criminal defense cases. And they went into all this stuff about all this alternative sentencing, and here's how drug court works, and here's how veterans court works. And I was like, I've never set foot in this building before. I didn't intern here. I need to know who the clerk is. There's like 6 people sitting by the judge. I don't know which one of them's the clerk. I don't know what the room numbers are. I don't know how to like where I sit. I don't know when I talk to somebody. I don't know if I could just say hey to the DA who was my classmate, or if I have to wait. Like, that kind of procedure stuff will drive you crazy. And it's so stressful, it doesn't leave you time to think about, like, oh, I think this was an illegal stop. This is a Fourth Amendment violation.
Right, you're right.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, I can't even find the bathroom. That's procedure.
Right.
I got you. That sounds stressful.
A lot of that is
great.
particular to both what court you're in and the judge, right? Like, there's some of that they can decide.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of local court rules, and some of them are published. Like, the Tennessee Supreme Court has a list of like court rules and like how to file whatever. But then like the local, like every individual district will have some rules, and then yes, even judges will have specific procedures for their room that they're like, for instance, when I was getting appointed cases when I was first starting out, like, some of the judges, you would just go to their office and talk to their assistant and say like, hey, here's my card, I want to take cases. But one of the judges, I don't know if she still does it, but the judge that used to run the domestic violence docket, you just showed up at 7:45 and literally got in line. And she'd be like, next, okay, here's your case, next, okay, here's your case. Like, there was none of this like, here I am, here's my card, I'm a cool guy, like, can I buy you coffee because you're an assistant?
Yeah.
Right. There was not
no schmoozing.
Yeah.
Is there like, so when you take the bar, that's for the state, right? Is it like?
Yes, correct.
So
per state.
If your cousin got arrested in Alabama and called you, would there be anything you could do?
That's so funny because that was the first note that I took. Daniel's son asks, Ralph Macchio asks his friends, like, he asks his friend, can you use any attorney when he's on the phone with his mom? And his friend's like, yeah, any attorney. And I wrote, no, you cannot use any attorney. And then there's the scene where the judge is interviewing him to see, like, am I going to let you practice here? And there is some, generally speaking, you have to be licensed in a state. And what that means still confuses me because my firm, we work on contracts and business formation and stuff outside of state and negotiating. But one thing I'm sure it means is whether or not you can appear in court in the state where you're licensed. But there is a way to get either like a temporary license or you can associate with a local attorney. But they kind of handled it with that scene when the judge was interviewing him. They didn't like explicitly explain every piece.
Right.
But I was like, oh man, every time I came up with I don't think they do that. That's not real. Like the movie explained it. Or I would check with a friend and they'd be like, yeah, people do that all the time.
So is that counting with when the judge sort of gives him a quick interview? Is that counting as associating with an attorney in the area, or is that
it's
just
probably the other
licensing?
Thing, which I should know the term for. Oh, pro hoc vice. There you go. You get a pro hoc vice, like a temporary permission to practice.
Okay.
But if you're smart, you should probably associate with a local attorney too. Okay. Not only because the laws of New York and Alabama, I assure you, are vastly different in a lot of ways, but also he would probably, or she in Alabama, or they would know like all the local procedures.
Yeah, maybe have a suit for you to borrow too.
Yeah, you wouldn't have to get that book from Judge Haller that you have to go over.
Yeah. And they would be like, hey, he hates leather jackets, don't wear one.
Right.
If they if your cousin called you, you could do that. Is that normal to have like that preliminary meeting? Is that just because it's a small town and he's from out of town and he's like, who the fuck is this guy? I was getting
the vibe that it was because he was an out of state lawyer, but
probably. I'm sure that it's a more formal and less personal thing. Generally, you get up on the website and it'll say like what to do, or even in 1991, you'd call the clerk's office and they'd say, here's how you apply for pro hoc vice. It's unlikely that it would require a personal interview with a judge, but that was pretty fun.
Yeah, I mean, they made the right call for the movie, I think, probably.
I don't feel like they did a lot just for the sake of a good story like they do a lot of times in movies. They did a lot of stuff where they're like, well, we're not going to spend hours filling out paperwork or something dumb, but they kind of addressed everything that I recognized along the way.
Well, the story is, I guess Jonathon Lynn, the director, was a lawyer at some point, and so it was important to him. This is from IMDb, so everybody, grain of salt.
Yeah, but put a big asterisk next to it. Asterisk.
Just every time.
Every time.
We're gonna have like
every time.
20-minute conversation.
Do a supercut of me saying asterisks.
I did think it was funny that he, at the end, and they're having the conversation, they're like, Vinny and Miss Vito, whose first name I don't remember, was like
Mona Lisa Vito.
Mona Lisa, that's right.
Lisa, colloquially Lisa, but technically Mona Lisa Vito.
And he said something about like, I really wanted to win a case on my own for the first time. And that was one thing where I was like, nobody ever wins a case on their first time without help. Like, for better or for worse, lawyering is such a like pass it on thing. Like, I haven't done anything where somebody didn't give me a bunch of paperwork or talk me through it or something.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny, like even the prosecutor is like kind of helping him. Like, just being like, hey, like, you seem like a nice guy. I was, he's clearly less experienced, you know what I mean? Like, even though he ends up losing the case to him, like, because they're doing their job. This is something we were talking about before you came in. It was just like, it kind of was refreshing that they didn't make him a cartoonishly evil guy, I liked that a lot. Yeah.
Because there are people out there who are just bastards, and I haven't interacted with a lot of them on the government side of either criminal prosecution or immigration prosecution. Like, the people I've dealt with have always been very cordial and very professional. With the exception of that county to the south of us, the guy was certainly polite, but he just wasn't going to deal. And he was like, well, they did the thing. And I'm like, this is not how criminal negotiation works. Anyway, but for the most part, everybody I've dealt with.
We're very polite and bastards.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Fuck you and bless your heart. But yeah, that I liked that a lot. And I thought it was rang very true. And also kind of like when he was presented with the extra evidence at the end and he dismissed the case, like that rang true too. Like prosecutors don't stick stuff to trial that they don't think can win. They're not just going to try to stick it to everybody.
Right.
And so that was like, okay, like he's a professional. It is a weird thing about being a lawyer that you have to learn how to, like, especially if you're something like a criminal defense attorney where you're in the same courthouse every day, 5 days a week. Like you can really stick it to a judge or really stick it to a prosecutor, but like you're gonna have to work with them on Monday.
Right.
So there does tend to be a lot of cordiality and a lot of like, you better do a good job. But if you show up and you're prepared and you do your job well, people will respect you, even if that means they lose on their end of the case.
Right.
I like that a lot.
Yeah. This is also where I learned about discovery. Like, this is the first time I'd ever heard of that. It seems crazy when you think about like TV shows, because they're always calling surprise witnesses, and like, at least in the shitty TV shows I grew up watching, you'd be like, aha, Mrs. Havisham shows up.
Well, to quote Lionel Hutz, surprise witnesses are a form of evidence. I have hearsay and conjecture, which are types of evidence.
I did. That was the one thing that I thought was a little lacking, is when the prosecution brought in the expert witness without giving him a chance to prepare for that. And the judge was like, oh, that was a well thought out thing. And also, objection overruled and didn't say why.
Right.
Yeah, I thought that was the one time when the judge almost tipped into villainy. Where he seemed like he was being a dick for the sake of being a dick.
I brought that one up to my law partner. We were talking about it today, and he was like, yeah, that seems pretty accurate. He's like, that's just like small town. We all know each other judging. And I'm like, that does happen. Like, and especially in something like an objection is firmly in the discretion of the judge. I mean, you could potentially like try to appeal on it later on one thing, but that would be pretty tough.
Right.
Yeah, I was talking to my buddy about that's the criminal defense attorney, about discovery, because when he first brought up, when Vinny first said like, oh, I wish I could get all his stuff, I'm like basically screaming on the couch like, you can. And then Marissa Tomei was like, you can. And I was like, oh my god,
he has to.
Yeah, but I was talking to my friend about it, and I'm like, can you interview witnesses? And he said that witnesses decide whether or not they'll talk to the prosecution or the defense.
Oh, interesting.
Ahead of time, and they can decline, and then you can subpoena them, and then they have to show up to court or be arrested, but you may or may not have the pre-time to discuss
the chance
with
to know
them.
what they're gonna to question them beforehand.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, I guess it's pretty even then. And he was like, nope, because the law enforcement agencies can just send sheriffs or police officers around to go try to get that person, but the defense has to hire investigators because you don't want to really be, if you're the attorney and you've like hounded this person and then you have to get them to work with you on the stand, you don't want to do that. So you want the separation. So you hire an investigator. And then he was like, oh yeah, like, but for indigent clients, you have to write an affidavit and a motion for each witness to get the funding from the court to have the investigator like $5,000 to get this person to go around and talk to the...
Jeez.
So it is actually a little bit pro-prosecution on that end of things. It's not like, sure, everybody can like decline to talk to either side, but like the DA's office can just call the police department and say like, can you guys try to round this guy up and see if he'll come talk to us? And like, the defense has to kind of put it together.
About disclosure, because in this movie, Vinny doesn't know about it, and then he, goes on that hunting trip with Lane Smith and says, oh, I wish I could get a look at your files. And it was like he said a magic word. Is it... Yeah. Do you have to ask for them? Or is it just like, because it's the law, he has to if you ask for them? Or is it, I just need to provide you with my files? If you're a cop, you have to
tell me.
Well, first of all, no,
that is a myth. I have learned that.
An undercover cop does not have to tell you that you're
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if that's a procedural thing. So you definitely have like some constitutional rights to build your case, and that includes access to all the files and the lists of witnesses. And that's also stuff that's built into procedural law. Like the book that that the judge gives Vinny is like Alabama Code of Criminal Procedure. Like every state has that.
Yeah.
And it'll say things, and there's also a code of civil procedure And so it'll say stuff like, oh, you have, 30 days to respond to this, and you have to write, move for that or whatever. But I don't know if the DA's office just has to
provide it out.
I do know that because I did that on a couple of the cases that I did. I had to do it, and I just emailed. I did write a formal request, and I think emailed it to the assistant DA I was working with against, and they sent me a huge packet of stuff.
So it is a matter of asking.
Yeah, but they do have to give it to you, and nobody I really don't think there's a lot of gotcha stuff,
right?
In much of the law. Once you get to court, like before that, there can be sometimes, but
yeah.
Is it normal for the sheriff was sitting at the prosecutor's table the whole time? The prosecution, is that that seems?
I have not seen that before. That could be a small town thing,
right?
Because usually police officers are not part of the prosecution. They get called as witnesses, which they did with him.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're not usually sitting at the table as part of the thing. Although the state, which includes anything in the state government, they do prosecute the case sort of as a
right.
On the DA's office I'm part of, which a lot of people don't know, and they get into upsetting situations about because they'll be like, I don't want to press charges anymore, but the victim doesn't decide. The state decides whether or not to press charges.
Right.
But yeah, that is weird that the sheriff would be sitting there for the whole trial.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of strange.
Good hair though, so maybe they just.
Oh yeah, he's got that Ron Swanson mustache. He's got that thick head of hair.
Those guys all seem very likable.
I only have one more law question. Do you have more, Damon?
I only really have one more, and it's more of a jail question. But yeah.
Have you ever said, I got no more use for this guy after questioning a witness?
No. And that was an interesting.
And I'm done with that guy.
when he kept being Vinny, even though he did put on a suit and clean up his language a little bit. I think that is very judge dependent.
Right.
Some judges will be okay, yeah, and some judges will be if you say that one more time, you're going to go to jail.
Fred Gwynn seems like he'd be if you say that one more time, I'm going to send you to prison again.
And that contempt of court stuff is real. If a judge says you're I told you not to do this, and you do it anyway, and the judge's I'm going to hold you in contempt, they'll do it. And it can be 2 days, 2 weeks in jail. They can kind of set that.
Is that just dependent on how mad the judge is, or how does that work?
I don't know if there's a set limits on that. If there's a law that says it can only be up to 48 hours or whatever.
Right. Is it a fine or jail, or is it definitely you're spending the night in jail at least?
I think I don't know that either. I think that is somewhat discretionary. Mm-hmm. And then there's a separate potential thing is that you can get called before the disciplinary board of the Board of Professional Responsibility, and they can fine you or censure you or temporarily suspend your license or whatever.
Okay. My other question was, and this, I don't know if this is in your wheelhouse, but so one of the plot points in this is that the jail has been condemned in Beecham County, and so that's why Stan and Daniel-san are sent to the state pen as people waiting on their trial. Would that be what happens? It feels very, it felt like a story trick so that they could have this Norton execution hang over their heads.
Yeah.
But I didn't know if that would be actually what would happen. If the prison is close enough, we would do that. Or would they send him to another county jail, or what would they do?
I'm not sure on that one either.
I thought that was a long shot myself, but just
I think I think it's not uncommon for correctional institutions, if they're the county jail or prison or whatever, to lend out space to each other, or
because it looked like they had their own wing,
courtesy,
and they were also alone on the basketball court when everyone else was in there, playing together. They got their own space, the prison was keeping them separate from everyone else. Yeah, for sure, and that rang true. Okay, I think that's not inconceivable at all, or I think, like you said, using another county's jail. But if you're a small county with not a lot of budget, busing those guys back and forth every day for a trial would be
a pain. So if there's a close prison, that makes sense.
Keep him in the
I was also watching this
jail.
Or like a dog kennel. If there's a nearby dog kennel, you can do that.
Yeah. I also found, I guess, unasked for non-lawyer opinion, but I watched most of this movie with my girlfriend who's from Alabama, and I've played a lot in Alabama because I was in a wedding band that was based out of there, and all their like driving through Alabama scenes seemed right on point.
Oh, really? Because that was a question. I'm like, are they over-southing this, or is this accurate?
So. I mean, stuff like dirt for sale, I haven't seen that, but like little like cruddy-looking roadside barbecue places that are probably amazing, and like the pine woods and stuff. I was like, this definitely looks like Alabama.
I've definitely bought dirt as a homeowner who gardens.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, I need dirt, please.
All right, most importantly, you get to be the judge for once. Caleb, what is your verdict on My Cousin Vinny?
Your Inner Child is not an idiot.
Oh,
I thought this was a fantastic movie, and
Order. People are getting a little out of hand.
They're hugging each other and crying.
I agree with some of Damon's insinuations earlier that like there's so many places where they could have really cartooned it up, or really like, I expected the judge to just be a complete caricature. I expected Vinny to be a caricature, and I thought it was like actually really kind of touchingly true to a lot of experiences that could have happened. And like the prosecution and the law enforcement weren't just like villains. Like they seemed kind of reasonable. Like they did confess to the crime.
I shot the clerk. And then he repeated, I shot the clerk.
Yeah, I thought it was great. I was glad for the opportunity to see it.
Well, good.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
My absolute pleasure. It's my favorite podcast.
Oh,
that's why I support it on Patreon.
Thank you.
Hizoner the Mayor.
Thank you.
You've blessed us once again.
Now let's talk shit about him.
That was great.
That was great.
Still recording, so.
But you wouldn't know where to put it.
Okay, so we were talking about the court scene.
We just started talking about. We had just finished talking about Lane Smith. If you wanted to move on to Gwen, or we can talk about his witnesses, but we sort of talked about them too.
Yeah, let's talk about the judge.
I mean, he is a favorite of this movie. We quoted him at the beginning. To what? Herman Munster, of course. Fred Gwynn. Yes. I read a little bit about him because I wasn't that familiar. I knew he was in the Munsters and Car 54, Where Are You? Which I've never seen Car 54, Where Are You? But I've seen the Munsters. It sounds like he, career-wise, it stalled out after the Munsters because everyone saw him as Herman Munster.
Right.
And he couldn't get work after that. Everyone wanted to sort of either cast him as like a heavy or a scary guy or something like that, and he just didn't want to do that. And so this is also his final movie. He died shortly after this, I think the following year, from pancreatic cancer. But he's so fucking charming in this movie. He's a lot more grumpy in it than I remember. I think I remember as a kid, like, he eventually warms up to Vinny, and he does, like, literally in the last scene warms up to Vinny. Yeah. But he is very anti-Vinny, staunchly, before that moment.
Yeah, but he gets a lot of... he is basically the reaction, right? To Vinny's
he's the audience reaction shots.
So you see him like getting mad. He's like, "What is this bullshit?" And then, but it's good. It is pretty grumpy, but I do find it charming too. Like it's like this seems, without being too caricature or too villainous as we've touched on, it does feel like earned. You know what I mean? His ire feels a little earned because this is like
I know what an arraignment is.
Yeah, like, some city slicker. You know, you probably think you're hot shit. You think we're idiots. That's what he's like. Basically, his first speech is like, "I assure you, the law and the rules are real here. You probably think we're a bunch of hicks, but this real." I can kind of understand that chip on the shoulder too, because like he sees him rolling in his leather jacket and his boots and his attitude
and his very young girlfriend.
Yeah.
With her skunk streak. He also has that very, he has a deep voice, and then he has this southern accent for the character, of course, which is very low and melodious southern accent. And that jacket better be made out of some sort of cloth. It's very... Very great Southern accent. The only thing I will push back on, and probably one of my more minor, one of my bigger complaints about this movie, I don't really like the through line of this Jerry Callow thing.
The defrauding of the court?
That's right.
Yeah.
Where, Joe Pesci is very self-conscious about his lack of experience in a trial. And while he's trying to get a temporary license to practice in Alabama, he fudges his experience by 16 years and says, that he'd done a lot of murder trials before.
He says 16 years instead of 6 months.
6 weeks. He had just gotten his license 6 weeks ago. He had done an axe murder trial. He defended the guy who was initially accused of being Son of Sam. So those are two of the cited.
That was my favorite lie. He was like, "Well, no, not that guy. The first guy they caught." It wasn't him. I got him.
The man who got instructions to kill from a dog. And it sort of becomes this almost sitcom-ish joke throughout the thing that then, of course, the judge looks him up, probably spurred on by Vinny's obvious, bad...
Too-muchery in the court.
Oyez, oyez. Har-ye. Too muchery in this court.
There's too much apple chancery happening in the court.
And he looks into him and he's like, I didn't find any evidence of a Gambini practicing in New York state courts. And Gambini says, well, you wouldn't find any evidence of Vance and Gambini practicing in the courts. And he's like, that's what I just said. And then he pretends his name is Jerry Gallo, which I guess is a big attorney in New York, according to this movie.
Came up with.
And then he realizes the reason he came up with it, he just saw that he had died in the paper last week. He saw the headlines about him last week. And then when he gets called out on that, he says his name is Jerry Callow. And that's when we find out at the end of the movie that Marissa Tomei called up Vincent's... His old mentor, to lie for him to the Alabama state courts that Jerry Callow is a very esteemed and well-regarded lawyer in New York State. But it adds this sitcom-y, zaniness to the end of the movie, actually throughout the movie. It does create the ticking time bomb of the movie where...
he's got to leave.
He's got to leave before the judge finds out that he's not who he says he is. But I don't know. It just... I don't know, it feels like kind of dickish. It definitely feels dickish. It's probably my one sour note with this plot is after treating the court very with respect, the plot at least and the script does, it seems like it just sort of sticks the shiv in right at the end.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it is also the idea that he would just be fine because he left. You know what I mean?
Right.
They wouldn't
invalidate.
Well, the defendant's
got on. Bye.
Yeah, it's they may rearrest your cousin because this whole, you know what I mean?
Because this whole trial was a sham and you don't have a license to practice law here.
I guess they wouldn't because they dismissed the charges, but I don't know how that works. But
yeah.
Anyway, I agree with you, but it didn't bother me. I don't think that much, just because it's kind of silly, but it's not.
No, I mean, and it's not so much time in the plot. It's just this thing that keeps recurring throughout. I'm like, all right, let's get on with it.
Yeah.
And even in those scenes, Vinny doesn't even seem like himself. He turns into sort of this really flustered character that we've never seen him as before. It's just odd to me. Although, I mean, I'm going to even push back up on myself. I do like seeing Vince. His whole demeanor changes when he's alone with the judge.
Yeah.
He sort of turns into a kid being called to the principal's office. It's very charming.
Yeah.
When they first meet and he has his feet up on the desk and the judge comes in and says, "You're dressed very informally. No shirt or tie." And Joe Pesci does this thing where he sort of dusts off the sweatshirt he is wearing and then puts his hand in front of his crotch, puts his hands behind his back, then puts his hands in front of his crotch again, then tries to put them in his pockets, then puts him in front of his crotch again, which is very kid in trouble, kid who got caught laughing in church or something.
And the second time he
like that
spills his whole chest set. When
that scene. Now I think that just that action itself, maybe because I'd be like, oh, he was in the middle of a game,
right?
It just it's a little too hijinksy for me.
Yeah.
In a movie that's not really hijinksy.
Yeah. I didn't mind. I kind of like the spilling of it.
It's not a big thing. I gotta find something here.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about Marissa's star turn? We kind of already touched on.
It's such a charming scene. The whole thing is great. It's contrived as all hell, of course.
Yeah, he calls Mona Lisa Vito as an expert witness to rebut the car expert from the FBI that the prosecution calls.
She gets voir dired by Lane Smith.
Yeah, which is very good. And she doesn't want to. She's mad at Vinny, so at first she doesn't want to do anything. And so he's like, how do I know you're not qualified? She's like, I'm not, and tries to leave. And like, sit the fuck down. Which I like that. Like, she doesn't want to do it, but then she starts to get bristle at the fact that he thinks she's just a little girl who doesn't know anything about cars. And she's like, right. Well, every single person I've ever known is a mechanic, and I've worked in a mechanic shop, And the
question you just asked me is a trick question. You're bullshitting me.
Yeah.
Although I got this feeling that Lane Smith also didn't know was a trick question. He didn't actually know the
answer, is the vibe I got. Yeah.
Yeah. She's fantastic. And it also creates a little bit of tension because what Vinny does is he lays out his defense again. The defense has argued that another identical mint green Buick Skylark arrived at the Sack of Suds, and those people killed the clerk after Ralph Macchio and Stan Rothenstein left. And he's like, does the defense's case hold water? And he shows her a picture that she took with her cute little pink camera.
Yeah.
Don't infantilize a woman's camera. Don't do it. It's rude. And she goes, no, the defense is wrong. And you see Ralph Macchio and Stan get very deflated. And it's a very good
scene. Are you
scene.
Sure?
I am positive.
I would love to hear this.
That is a really great, their repartee and their sort of semi-sexy, arguing comes back into play at that end last scene. And it's very charming. It's beyond belief. It's an overdose of charm. It's great. It's a great thing. Give her the fucking Oscar. Stop being an asshole, Jason.
Vanessa Redgrave just turning over in
She's
her
got
grave.
plenty of Oscars.
She's still alive?
Tappa. Vanessa Redgrave, I think, actually died recently.
She's turning over in her red grave.
Oh, she's alive. I think it's Lynn Redgrave that's dead, her sister.
Let's see. Have famous siblings if you don't want us to not know if who's dead.
Yes, Lynn died in 2010. But Vanessa, also known as the narrator of Call the Midwife, she is alive. And her children are Natasha Richardson, Jolie Richardson, and Carlo Gabriel Nero. So,
okay.
Fucking
good to know.
Deal with that.
It's great. It really is great. It is up there with Jack Nicholson on the chart as for great courtroom scenes.
Opposite ends of the spectrum, but yes. A man justifying killing a soldier under his watch, and Marissa Tomei declaring that the Buick Skylark could never be confused for a Corvette.
I feel like we've covered it. You want to go to the verdict?
Were.
It's a fact.
Oh, it's a fact. Oh, wait, I just want to get this one Fred Gwynn line. I'm not about to revamp the entire judicial system just because you find yourself in the unique position of having clients that say they didn't do it.
Already very over Vinny's shtick.
Once again, the communication has broken down. He was just one step away from being, well, what do we have here? Yeah. All right, yeah, we can go to the verdict. DJ.
Oh, yes.
What was your takeaway, verdict-wise on this? Ooh, verdict. Did you know that's a legal term?
I did.
It comes from the word, Old English.
Now, you've seen the arguments presented to you. You've seen the positives. You've seen nothing, actually. You've heard the positives. You've heard the negatives. Mm-hmm. You've heard us talk about it's not good to make fun of stuttering. You've heard us you say it's not good to infantilize someone's cute little pink camera. But you've also heard us extol the virtues of Marissa Tomei's performance, of Lane Smith's performance, of Herman Munster's performance. And
pissed if he heard you said that. He
and
would haunt you.
I think that we can all, and this might be a surprise to you that I feel this way.
I mean, the tension's building because I just don't know where this is going. What
Your inner child
is
definitely not an idiot. This movie's great. I was right. I've seen it enough times that I wasn't in a highly doubtful position because I've seen this recently enough that I knew it was at least passably good, if not like as good as I remembered. You know what I mean? But it's great. I got minor things with it, quibbles,
which are larger quibbles.
Yeah, but I think it's great. I have no doubt about that. It's very solidly in the good camp. I would watch it again. I thought it was funny. I pick up little things that I miss every time. Like you pick up new things. I think some of my favorite moments are the little moments, like there's a little comedic
it's the little things.
Well, just like like you mentioned, him like adjusting his clothes or like it's little stuff like that. Just little bits are very good. Marissa Tomei, I was paying special attention to her this time because she has a lot of good like just little one-liner kind of things like, oh, you're a smooth talker, you are. Like it's very charming. Damon Xanthopoulos. Care to redirect?
You're going to hear a lot of terms in this verdict. Voir dire, jury, expeditiously. But I'm just a small country lawyer.
Tiny little guy.
I just stand 3'2", and I'm small. This from the smallest county you can imagine. It fits on the head of a pin.
Just a little who from Whoville.
Horton heard me, and I did a trial in his ear. I did a trial in his ear? I said, Mr. Gulliver, you cannot come in here stomping like this. This is private property.
This is Lilliput. We have laws here.
Lilliputian. The rules of Lilliputian civil practice, it fell apart at the end. Anyway, I agree. Your inner child is not an idiot. This is very charming, winning, as both old people and my friend Bethany would say. It's a winning movie. It's very funny, like laugh out loud funny. If this was a VHS of My Cousin Vinny, that would be my pull quote that'd be on the top. Laugh out loud, ... funny. It's apparently very accurate, as Caleb was telling us. And just everyone is doing a great job in it. Everyone is creating characters that you remember and you're charmed over by. I love that there's no like overt villainy. It's just like talking about a trial process and the incompetency of small town policing. Don't say incompetency. Just incompetence. I am incompetent at talking. I mean, Tomei is charming. I think they give her a lot of things to sink her teeth into, and she does it with aplomb. Lane Smith, as we talked about, I think what I like about this is there's a lot of smaller actors like just really coming into their own and like when given a meaty part, they all like really excel at it. But I feel like almost everything in this movie is great. There's rarely anything that I would really cut out. This is a really fucking funny movie. Go watch it. It's on HBO Max. Thanks.
What do you think, everybody? Email us, yourinnerchildisanidiot@gmail.com. You can call us, leave us a voicemail, or text us at 615-576-0525. You can find us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. And you can also find us on Patreon, patreon.com/yourinnerchildisanidiot. We want to thank our current patrons, including the Hands of Fate,
Dan McIntyre,
Jonathon Day,
Jackson has an unhealthy obsession with Damon,
the Elusive fan Gromkin,
Shit on the Cartouche,
Kevin from Cleveland,
Josh Frigo,
Dramatically Placed Hot Dog,
Travis Vance,
Hizoner the Mayor. Yeah, and thank you for your legal expertise.
I'm grabbing both sides of my seersucker lapels.
You can't tell, but I'm tamping my pipe. Is that a thing you do?
Maybe, but tobacco is king, so I mean, you just might have a cigarette. Although you can have tobacco in a pipe. I don't know why I'm pushing back on it. Beth Surmont.
David Mort.
The supreme ruler of this podcast.
Just cause...
Scalfasaurus, come to the bench.
Dr. Malcolm Stephen Bosom, I believe we need to have a repartee.
Wait, were you trying to do Jeff Goldblum stammering while also doing the Southern accent, keeping the lawyer Southern accent?
Yes.
Well done. Captain Jean-Luc Picard. Go ahead. I want you to keep a Southern accent while also doing an Australian accent. If you do a Southern Australian accent, extra points.
Demon's Australian accent.
Flawless. T. Smith.
Karen Curd.
No, I say. Lindsey Nell.
The Zesty.
Jeremy Powlen.
Larissa Maestro.
Heather Tuggle.
Particle Man. Thank you all very, very much, and I apologize for all that just happened.
They didn't pay for their names to be said like
we
that.
really appreciate your support. If you want to support like them, patreon.com/innerchild'sanidiot, and have your name butchered in the credits. Butchered like this young man who was killed in the street.
Wait, is the man who was butchered in the street in the courtroom? Are you addressing him?
I'm just gesturing generally to the east, which is where the sack of suds is. We all know it's down there off of Route 4.
So you use the word "this" to describe someone who's not present and is far away.
Look, this is a colloquial term. I can use it in a lot of different ways.
This is a colloquial term. What a claim!
This here courtroom. Where
now that would be an accurate use of the word "this."
That here, judge.
That here, that is just those two words alone is a great pairing. That here, judge.
All right, goodbye.